I was just weeks away from marrying the love of my life until I discovered the truth that shattered everything: betrayal, secrets, and a past she couldn't escape. But what I did next, even I didn't see coming. My name is Kwabena, and I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I was weeks away from my wedding, ready to marry the love of my life, Aisha, when I uncovered a secret that tore my heart to pieces. What I found out about her betrayal and what I did next is something that will leave you speechless. This is my story. Aisha and I met during her final year at university. She was smart, beautiful, and ambitious, everything I had ever wanted in a woman. We clicked instantly, and over the years, our bond grew stronger. I supported her through her final exams, helped her get her first job, and we even began planning a life together. After 3 years of dating, I proposed to her under the warm African sunset, and she said yes. It felt like a dream come true. Our families were thrilled. The wedding was going to be a grand celebration in our hometown, with friends and relatives coming from all over the country. I felt like the luckiest man in the world. But little did I know, behind Aisha's smiles and promises, there was a secret she had been hiding from me. A secret that would unravel everything I thought I knew about her. Looking back now, the signs were always there. Aisha had always been very private about her past, especially about her time at university. I assumed she was just focused on the future and didn't want to dwell on her past. But about 6 months before our wedding, things began to change. She started receiving late-night phone calls and would excuse herself to take them in another room. If I asked who it was, she'd brush it off, saying it was a friend or work colleague. Her behavior was different. The cheerful, loving woman I knew started becoming distant. She canceled dates at the last minute, came home late from work, and even avoided talking about the wedding plans. My friends began noticing the change too, but I defended her. I loved her, and I refused to believe something could be wrong. One day, she received a call while we were having dinner. I watched as her face turned pale, and she quickly excused herself. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw the worried look in her eyes. When she returned, I asked her if everything was okay. She smiled, but it was forced. "Just work," she said. But my gut told me there was something more. It was 3 weeks before the wedding, and I was working late at home on some final details, organizing the guest list, confirming the caterer, things like that. Aisha had gone out earlier, saying she was meeting some old friends from university. She didn't invite me to join, which I found odd, but I let it slide. That night, my cousin Kwame called me. He sounded hesitant at first, but then spoke in a tone that made my heart sink. "Kwabena, there's something I need to tell you. I wasn't sure if I should, but I saw Aisha today, with someone else." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "I saw her at a restaurant in town. She was with an older man, and they were very close. They held hands, and it didn't look like a simple meeting between friends. I think you should talk to her." "An older man?" My mind raced. This couldn't be right. I knew most of Aisha's friends from university, and none of them were older men, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in Kwame's voice. That evening, when Aisha returned home, I was waiting for her in the living room. She walked in with a smile, but I could tell she sensed something was wrong. I confronted her, my voice trembling with both anger and hurt. "Who is the man you were with today, Aisha? Don't lie to me." Her face went pale, and for the first time in our relationship, I saw real fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I pressed her again, and finally, The truth came pouring out. His name was Alhaji. He was a wealthy businessman, much older than her, who had been supporting her financially during her university days. Aisha had never told me about him. While she was in school, he paid for her tuition, her rent, and even gave her money to live comfortably. In exchange, she would spend time with him whenever he requested. It started out as an arrangement, but over the years, he had grown possessive. Aisha began to tear up as she recalled the first time she met Alhaji. She was just a second-year student, overwhelmed by the pressures of university and struggling to make ends meet. Her father had lost his job, and she was barely able to cover her living expenses. One day, she said quietly, I was at a fundraising event for the university, and I met Alhaji. He was one of the biggest donors. At first, he seemed kind. We exchanged numbers, and he started helping me with my rent, my bills, everything. I didn't think it would go this far. She hesitated, glancing at me as if searching for understanding. He told me I didn't need to worry about anything. He offered to pay for everything, as long as I spent time with him. It was innocent at first, just lunches, but then it turned into something more. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I was about to marry had been sneaking around with another man, not because she loved him, but because she felt obligated to repay him for his generosity. I looked her in the eyes, my heart breaking. So every time you left the house, every time you came home late, it was because of him? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to hurt you. I love you, Kwabena, but he wouldn't let me go. For the first time, I could see the weight of Aisha's burden. The guilt, the fear, the sense of being trapped in a web she could never escape. Her voice trembled as she tried to explain her feelings, almost as if she was torn between two worlds. I thought I could handle it, Kwabena, she whispered, clutching her hands tightly. I thought once we were married, I'd be able to cut him off completely. But every time I tried, he reminded me of everything he'd done for me. I felt like I owed him, and I was afraid. Afraid of what? I asked, my heart heavy with both sorrow and anger. Afraid of what he could do, she confessed, tears spilling down her cheeks. He's powerful. He knows people. If I left him too suddenly, I feared he could ruin me, my career, my life. I didn't want you involved in any of that. Her words hit me hard. It was no longer just a story of cheating. It was a story of power, manipulation, and control. She had been caught in a situation she felt she couldn't escape from, and now it was ruining our lives. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with thoughts of what to do next. Canceling the wedding seemed like the obvious choice, but part of me still loved her. I had invested years into this relationship, and I wasn't ready to let it go without a fight. But how could I marry someone who had been lying to me for so long? The next day, I confronted her again. This time, I wanted answers. Do you still see him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her silence spoke volumes. She didn't need to say anything. The truth was already clear. You have to choose, Aisha. Him or me. I can't live in his shadow forever. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, but her hesitation was all the answer I needed. She wasn't ready to let go of Alhaji. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was the security he provided, or maybe she was just too deep into that life to see a way out. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. The wedding was off. As I walked out of our home that day, memories of our happier times flooded my mind. I remembered the first time I took her to meet my family. Her laughter had filled the room, her bright eyes promising a future full of love and joy. We had planned our life together, from the house we would build to the names of the children we would one day have. In those moments, it felt like nothing could ever come between us. But now those memories only deepened the pain. The trust I had once felt was shattered, and all that was left was the hollow ache of betrayal. Canceling a wedding is one of the hardest things anyone can do, especially in our culture, where family and community are so intertwined in every aspect of life. I had to explain to my family, my friends, and everyone who had been looking forward to the celebration why it was no longer happening. The shame, the embarrassment, the heartbreak, it was overwhelming. Aisha tried to reach out to me several times in the days that followed. She begged for another chance, swore she would cut ties with Alhaji once and for all. But the damage was done. The trust was gone. And without trust, what kind of future could we possibly have? In the months that followed, I focused on healing. I reconnected with my roots, spent time with my family, and began rebuilding my life piece by piece. I had learned a hard lesson. Love isn't just about feelings. It's about trust, loyalty, and honesty. Without those, love is nothing but a hollow shell. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, I heard some news that shook me once more. A few months after our breakup, I found out through a mutual friend that Aisha had returned to Alhaji. They were seen together in public, and from what I heard, he had promised her a life of luxury. A house, a car, everything she could ever want. The very man she claimed was just a past mistake had now become her future. I couldn't help but wonder, had she ever truly loved me? Or was I just another chapter in her life, one that she could close whenever it suited her? Today, I'm still healing, but I've grown stronger. I've learned to trust my instincts, to value myself, and to never settle for less than I deserve. Betrayal leaves scars, but it also teaches you who you are and what you're worth. I may never know why Aisha made the choices she did, but I've learned to let go. And that, my friends, is the real victory. The end. Thanks for listening. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories and insights on relationships.